She built a library that gave away 300 million free books. She turned down a fortune from Elvis's own manager just to keep her name on her own songs. She was worth hundreds of millions and chose, again and again, to give it away instead of hoarding it. Yesterday, Dolly Parton died in Nashville. She was 80 years old. But here's what almost nobody is talking about today. In the final 18 months of her life, Dolly Parton wasn't performing. She wasn't writing hits. She was doing something so ordinary, so unglamorous, that most of us will never see it coming, even though the odds say most of us will do it too. She was taking care of a dying husband, and in the process, she was quietly dying herself. This isn't just the story of how a legend passed. It's a warning she gave us in plain sight months before the end, and almost nobody listened. Chapter 1. The woman America thought it knew. Everyone knows the rhinestones. Everyone knows Jolene, 9 to 5, the wig collection, the one-liners. But the real story of Dolly Parton is a masterclass in something rarer than fame. Control. Early in her career, she was offered a life-changing sum to sell off her publishing rights, the ownership of her own songs, to a music executive connected to Elvis Presley's camp. She said no. That single decision, made when she had far less power than the men asking her to sign, is why decades later she controlled hundreds of millions of dollars in royalties instead of a flat payday. And then she did something almost nobody with that kind of money does. She gave it away deliberately instead of stacking it. Her father, Robert Lee Parton, never learned to read. That single fact became the engine behind one of the most quietly massive philanthropic projects in American history, the Imagination Library, a program that mails free books to children from birth. By this year, it had delivered more than 300 million books to kids across multiple countries. When wildfires tore through the Great Smoky Mountains near her childhood home, she didn't wait for a press cycle. She put cash directly into the hands of families who'd lost everything. When the pandemic hit, she quietly helped fund vaccine research at Vanderbilt University. Dollywood employees got their college tuition paid in full by her. This is the woman the world celebrated yesterday. But it's not the whole story, because underneath the icon was a wife, and for the last years of her husband's life, a full-time, hands-on caregiver. Chapter 2. The man who never wanted the spotlight. In 1964, an 18-year-old girl fresh off the bus in Nashville met a man named Carl Dean outside a laundromat. He didn't know who she was going to become. He didn't care about show business at all. They married 2 years later, in 1966. For nearly 60 years, Carl Dean did something almost unheard of in Hollywood marriages. He stayed completely out of the spotlight. He didn't walk red carpets. He rarely appeared in photos. While Dolly built an empire, he ran an asphalt paving business back home and let her be the star. She has said publicly, many times over the years, that he was the reason behind some of her most iconic songs, including the jealousy and longing at the heart of Jolene. He was, by every account, her anchor. Carl Dean died in March of 2025, at 82 years old, after 58 years of marriage. And in the months before his death, when he was seriously ill, Dolly didn't hire it out. She didn't disappear behind a wall of nurses and assistants and let the public only see the highlight reel. She stepped into the role that more than 60 million ordinary Americans are quietly carrying right now. She became his caregiver. Chapter 3. What caregiving actually looks like. Here's what almost never makes it into the tribute videos. Being a full-time caregiver for a spouse isn't sitting bedside holding hands. It's clinical. It's relentless. It's managing medication schedules with no formal training. It's tracking symptoms and trying to figure out at 3 a.m. whether something is an emergency or not. It's losing sleep night after night for months, sometimes years. Dolly did this, not as a celebrity with a team standing behind her taking notes. As a wife doing the work herself, the way millions of Americans do it for parents, spouses, and siblings every single day. And here's the number that should stop you. More than 60 million Americans are currently unpaid family caregivers. On average, they're doing this nearly 27 hours a week. Essentially a part-time job on top of whatever else is going on in their lives. Nearly 1 in 4 of them are doing it for more than 40 hours a week. That's a full-time job. Unpaid, untrained, often invisible. And in the middle of doing that for Carl, Dolly started doing what almost every caregiver in America does. She stopped doing it for herself. Chapter 4. The Cost She Paid. After Carl passed away in March 2025, Dolly did something unusually honest for a public figure. She told fans directly that she had let things go. She admitted on camera that she had been worn down and worn out. She talked about health issues she hadn't dealt with, doctor's visits she had postponed, symptoms she'd pushed through instead of addressing, all while she was focused entirely on keeping her husband alive and comfortable. By early this year, she was postponing shows. By spring, she was publicly addressing rumors about her health, insisting she was still fighting. And this week, the reports say she had, in fact, been quietly battling cancer. This is not a coincidence, and doctors who study caregiving will tell you that. When you spend years in a state of chronic stress, the kind that comes from caring for a dying spouse, your body pays a physiological price. Cortisol, your stress hormone, stays elevated for extended periods. Elevated cortisol over time is linked to higher blood pressure, a weakened immune system, and what researchers call accelerated biological aging. Your body effectively getting older faster than the calendar says it should. Dolly Parton spent the final years of her life protecting someone else's health while her own was quietly eroding in the background. And less than a year and a half after burying her husband, she followed him. Chapter 5. The pattern no one wants to name. The widowhood effect. There's a term researchers use for exactly what happened here. It's called the widowhood effect, and it describes something doctors have observed for decades. Surviving spouses are significantly more likely to face serious health decline, or even death, within 12 to 18 months of losing their partner. Dolly Parton died roughly 18 months after Carl. That's not superstition. That's a documented pattern, and it happens for reasons that are almost entirely explainable. First, acute grief is not just emotional, it's physical. The trauma of losing a life partner spikes inflammation throughout the body and puts real strain on the cardiovascular system. Grief can, quite literally, break a heart. Second, when a caregiving spouse dies, an entire invisible support system disappears overnight. The person who reminded you to eat, the person who nudged you to take your pills, the shared rhythm of meals and routines that quietly kept both of you healthier than either of you realized. When that person is gone, self-neglect can move in fast because nobody's watching anymore. And third, maybe the hardest one to say out loud, is purpose. When your entire daily existence has revolved around keeping someone else alive, their death can leave behind something that feels like an empty room where your whole life used to be. Grief researchers describe it as a loss of the will to keep going, even when nothing is technically wrong. Dolly Parton lived this, in public, and she told us about it, in her own words, months before the end, and most of the world was too busy celebrating her legacy to hear the warning underneath it. Chapter 6. Her final lesson, and what you need to do with it. So what do you actually do with this? Because a tribute video that just makes you sad isn't worth your 15 minutes. Here's what caregiving researchers and grief specialists say, and what Dolly's story makes painfully clear. If you're a caregiver right now, put your own oxygen mask on first. That's not selfish, it's survival. Do not cancel your own doctor's appointments. Do not wave off your own chronic symptoms because someone else's needs feel more urgent. If you go down, the person depending on you loses their caregiver too. Take it in seasons, not as one endless marathon. You don't have to see the next 5 years. Get through today. Get through this week. Caregiving that's framed as an infinite sentence breaks people. Caregiving that's framed as just get through this season is survivable. And drop the guilt. You are not required to be a lone superhero. Asking for help is not failure. It's the only version of this that actually works long-term. If someone you love is caregiving right now, stop sending "let me know if you need anything." It sounds kind, but it puts the entire burden of asking back on the exhausted person, and exhausted people rarely ask. Instead, take concrete action. Drop off a meal in containers they can just toss, no dishes to return. Handle one chore without being asked. Offer a specific block of time. I've got him from 2 to 6 on Saturday, go rest, instead of a vague, open-ended offer that requires them to do more work to accept it. And zoom out for a second, because this isn't just a personal failure happening in millions of individual homes. It's a systemic one. Family caregivers are routinely sent home from hospitals with zero clinical training to manage medications, wound care, or medical equipment. There is still no comprehensive paid family leave system in this country to protect the income of someone who has to step back from work to care for a dying parent or spouse. And affordable respite care, someone qualified stepping in so a caregiver can rest for even a few hours, is still nowhere near where it needs to be for the tens of millions of Americans who need it. Dolly Parton had access to more resources than almost anyone on the planet. And it still ultimately cost her everything. If it can happen to her, what do you think it's doing to the 60 million Americans doing this exact same thing tonight, with none of her resources and none of the world watching? Dolly Parton spent her life giving free books, wildfire relief, tuition, vaccine research, and in the end, she gave one more thing, whether she meant it as a lesson or not, proof in real time of what caregiving without support actually costs a person. Rest in peace, Dolly. And to everyone watching this who is exhausted, running on no sleep, managing someone else's medications while ignoring your own symptoms, this one's for you. Take care of yourself. She'd want you to. If someone in your life is caregiving right now, don't just like this video. Send it to them. Or better, call them and ask what they actually need today.